The Hamburglar, Incognito, Mere Laws, Why Coach Got Fired, Slade Steps Up, Legions of Salukis, and a Visit from Big Bad Bald Moats. 1, 2, 3. A Roar from the Depths, Bailing Wire. "You look like the goddamn Hamburglar," said Slade, a grin cracking his face for the first time all week. It may have been the first time he'd spoken since Coach was canned. It looked strange. Slade smiled dead on a face with two black eyes and a freshly crooked nose. It looked a little painful, but it brought warmth to all of our chests to see it there on Slade's battered mug. And the cause of it brought on even more of a glow, one that warmed us from deep inside. "Coach, Slade's right. You do look like the Hamburglar," agreed Bowden. He was laughing and shaking his head. "Man, Dr. Billings is sure to spot you in that crazy getup. That's why I'm hiding in the woods here. The disguise is just in case anyone sees me." He cracked a crooked grin and assumed a crouching ready-for-anything stance as his voice dropped into a whisper. "I'm Incognito." He seemed in high spirits for a man who'd just lost his job, his family, and his home. Coach had jumped out at us on our warm-up before sectionals from behind a tree in a forest loop on the course. He wore black pants, a black shirt, and a big black hat. Some strange affair somewhere between a bowler and a fedora that he'd pulled down low to hide his face. He also had a navy windbreaker tied around his neck for some crazy reason. It looked at first glance like a cape. "Rubble, rubble," said Victor. "Aren't you supposed to stay away from us?" asked Hyder, his toe digging into the ground. "I mean, I'm glad to see you. It's just, isn't there some kind of court order or something saying you can't be within 1,000 feet of us or talk to us?" Coach waved that off. "Mere laws," he said. "This moment transcends any laws made by the fallible minds of men. This, my boys, is the sectional." Coach was downright swashbuckling that day. "Love," he proclaimed, "is the root of all courageous acts." He paused to let that soak in. He paused a little too long, and Swartz started nodding impatiently, circling his hand. Coach got the hint and fired back up. "And I've found the courage to be here." My heart quickened a touch to hear such grandiose language and such tender sentiments from the lips of Coach. I wondered if he'd been drinking. He then grew quiet, his mood shifting. He grew very sober. "The truth is," he said, his brown eyes glancing around sheepishly, "I didn't know how much you guys meant to me until I didn't get to see you all week." He looked down at the ground. "Truth is, you boys are family." We all looked at the ground at this confession, not because we were embarrassed by it, but because we felt the same. In that silence, though, I had an epiphany, not the good kind either. A flash of psychic lightning seemed to strike me, and I was suddenly certain that it was I who had been the impetus of Coach's firing. The possibility, I realized later, had been gnawing at me all week. The truth was I hadn't slept well since Victor's restaurant. It was at that moment, though, standing there before Coach as he expressed his love for us, that I remembered with sudden force and vividness that night back in early September at the dinner table when I'd spoken so disparagingly of him. The night I'd begun my attempt to get Coach fired, which ended with my dastardly lie about him punching me. I remembered the looks of concern on my mother's face as I described Squid's being taped to a pole and Slade's eating of his Walkman, while we all cheered him on, at Coach's insistence, no less. I remembered Dad's eventual call to Dr. Billings to tell him my coach had hit me. That conversation had lasted nearly half an hour. Surely the discussion had been about things true as well as my giant lie. Coach was right. You run a monkey up a tree, you are going to see its ass. And I was the guy who had run him up the tree to begin with. It seemed the effects of my lie would ripple on throughout my high school years, maybe even my life. As I stood there, I thought of Squid, who hadn't told anyone about being duct-taped to that telephone pole. Squid, whom all of us agreed was generally a spineless, lazy, spoiled brat. I remembered him saying to me when I'd asked if he was going to tell, which felt like planting the seed and nearly telling myself, now that I thought of it, that he would never tell. That he had more spine than that. A look of utter disgust had crossed his face when I'd even mentioned the idea. So Squid was and always had been more of a man than I. After all, it had been me, not Squid, who had ultimately ratted It had been me who had been walking the tightrope of loyalty all along, and who had fallen off. I suddenly found that I couldn't look Coach in the face. The 7 of us who were running that day, me, Hyder, Keene, Victor, Slade, Bowden, and Yost, had, out of deeply ingrained habit, built by hours in that musty locker room, formed a horseshoe with Coach filling in the open space at the top. We fell quiet quickly and waited for Coach's final words. I was sure he would begin by pointing at me. He would then explain to our varsity 7 how it was me who had gotten him fired. I decided to confess it, right then and there, rather than be called out. "Coach," I stuttered, unable to look at him in near tears. Coach put his index finger to his pursed lips. "Shh," he whispered, his brown eyes boring into mine. He knew. "You just shut the hell up about me and what happened to me, because today ain't about me, and it ain't about Dr. Billings or the school board, or nothing like that." I nodded. Coach spoke to us in a quiet, calm voice as we shuffled our spikes in the damp orange and yellow and brown leaves at our feet. Our bare ankles shooting from the bottoms of Coach's gray sweatpants were thin and delicate like the legs of a racehorse. I know because I was staring at them the whole time. "This day is about you," he said. "It's about the 7 of you." He was firm and in control. He was in no way the man who ran out of Victor's restaurant screaming for us to hurry and get on the bus. He wasn't the man who broke down in the driver's seat of his car on that hot August morning in the cornfield. He didn't apologize or cry. He looked at us all in the face, and by the time he was done, I'd steeled myself inside. I'd made up my mind about how I was going to run the race, and I was going to do it for Coach. I would make up for my sins as best I could. Just a minute before the gun, we were stripped down, standing out past the start line with all the other teams. Interim coach Willie Davis, yes, that Willie Davis, the man who had once upon a time told me I was a runner, pulled Slade over, gave him a few words, and then allowed the 7 of us our own moment before the race. Slade took over. We'd never done a chant or a cheer or a prayer before a race. Coach didn't believe in it. "If you still need to talk about it a minute before you're supposed to do it, you ain't ready to do it," he'd say. But on that day, we did. "Get in here, guys," said Slade. We automatically formed a circle. Coach has never been to regionals, and it looks like he'll never go. But we can go there, and he'll be with us. He'll know it. Slade's black eyes were glinting as he spoke. He looked ready to attack. He looked ready to race. Shit, maybe he can hide in the goddamn woods again. Be even happier than he just was. My eyes flicked around the circle. Victor, Swart, Bowden, Keene, my brother, Yost. They all looked ready, their eyes steady and calm, their mouths firmly set. "We can run with him in our hearts today," continued Slade. "We can carry him with us." Just then, Moats, the big, bald runner from Ridgeline, sauntered by. It felt like a lifetime since Slade had gotten into it with him on that hot afternoon back in September. The Salukis' other varsity runners were surrounded by 50 or 60 JV runners in spotless matching warm-ups who were chanting, "It's great to be a Ridgeline Saluki," over and over, clapping 3 times in perfect unison between each chant. I expected them to start goose-stepping. Moats leaned into our circle, shoving his way in between my brother and Keene. "Howdy, boys," he shouted in his best hayseed accent, grinning at us all like the fool he was. "Farm work all done? You snappers ready for a little jogging?" I was sure for a moment that Slade was going to jump on him then and there and pummel him into the ground. Half of me wished he would, the other half prayed he wouldn't. We couldn't afford to lose Slade. Slade ignored him, totally. It was as if Moats didn't exist. I knew then that Slade was going to have the race of his life. Moats' gloating skeletal grin shifted a little. His eyes lost a bit of their mischievous gleam. "Get out of here," said Hyder calmly and quietly. He sounded like a mean old dog roused from a nap by a careless child, as if he was seconds away from going for Moats' throat. I'd never been more proud of him. "Well," Moats said, shifting gears after not getting the desired response. "Good luck today, then." He was trying to save face, acting like he'd always intended goodwill. "Are you done?" asked Victor coolly. "Yeah," said Moats, his smile totally gone, a look of confusion and embarrassment taking its place. "Yeah," he repeated, "I'm done." "Goodbye, then," growled Yost. On that day we would not be distracted. On that day we were one. We were truly zoned in, all of us. There would be no stupid kamikaze first miles, and there would be no self-doubt when the pain set in halfway through the race. There was Coach, and there was, flowing through all of us, the bond he had, in his own crazy way, created in us. The starter called us back to the line, his voice formal and electric through the megaphone. Slade put his hand in the center of the tight circle we'd formed, and we all did the same automatically, placing our hands on top of each other's. "Okay," said Slade. "On three. Coach is the word." I'd never felt such a powerful surge inside of me in my life before. As he chanted 1, 2, 3, it was as if the energy of all my teammates was in me and mine flowing out into that stack of hands and into them. "Coach," we shouted on his signal. I jumped, roared, pounded my chest as we jogged back to the start. I had to. If I'd kept what I was feeling inside me entirely, I would have exploded. While they may not have let loose as I did, I saw the same look, the same glaring intensity on the faces of my teammates. As we high-kneed it back to the line, I glanced at Ridgeline, 2 boxes over from us. Mutz was staring. He was staring at me. His eyes were wide, his brow registered some crinkly kind of confusion. He looked scared. He should have. I was locked and loaded and ready to rock and roll. I was ready to cut some heads, eat some glass, any other cliche you can think of concerning readiness to compete. Nothing was going to stop me from running as hard as I could run. But Moats should have even been more scared of Leonardo than he was of me, because Leonardo was carrying 8 feet of baling wire and was hiding in the woods, waiting for Moats's big bald moon of a head to come around a dark corner. And I should have been as scared of Leonardo as Moats, because I would not be where Leonardo thought I would.